podcast, a show for all genders and species about bringing some humanity and a bit of fun to the world of finance and tech and leaving you with a little something that can help you on your way. All right, please enjoy. Thanks. All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Finance Guys and Tech podcast and Finance Guys TV. Today we have esteemed guest, Mr. Joe Minarik, joining us. Joe, thanks for making the time to come on the show.
Absolutely.
I'm going to read a quick bio just to give people some background, and then we'll jump into it. So Joe is our business partner, and he is the director and global head of Data Center Solutions, the team here in AWS Infrastructure. And like I said, this is the business team Sid and I support. He manages a team of 100 people worldwide, from Tokyo to Sydney to London to here in Seattle and more. And they're responsible for delivering the data center capacity for the entire AWS portfolio. This includes, according to our website now, 24 launched regions and counting, and 216 points of presence across the globe. Joe has been with AWS since 2005, which was the year before AWS launched externally in 2006. He got his degree in computer science at the University of Michigan, home state, if I'm not mistaken. And he got his start as a systems administrator for National Semiconductor in the 90s. He's had a wide experience in data center and communication space in his 15 years, including the Walt Disney Company, and we're just very excited to have you on the show today. So that's in a nutshell.
Okay. Yep. Covered a lot of it there.
So Joe, to start with, what were you like growing up as a kid?
Was I like growing up as a kid?
Yep.
I grew up on a farm. I've been driving tractors and vehicles since I was about 5. Working all the time. And I was kind of the kid that liked to tear things apart and try to figure out how they worked. So, we had a lot of opportunity in working on equipment, but then there was kind of the radio in the house that I tore apart to try to figure out how the voices came out of it. And then, things like that. So it was always kind of that learn and be curious aspect and try to figure out how things may work and be more efficient and effective was kind of the other piece. So, as we worked the field, I was always trying to figure out the most optimal path to get something done so that I could get out of it sooner, not have to do all that extra work.
What did you want to be when you were growing up?
I didn't really know for a long time. I did know that as I started getting older, I really liked electronics. Liked getting into some of the computer stuff, so I kind of naturally went that way. A lot of the farm equipment that we had started to become more electronics. Some older stuff was just kind of basically a diesel engine with some hydraulics to run the equipment. And then later they started getting a lot more electronics on it. So where some of the first avenues was kind of in our planters, and we were planting stuff, all the electronics and how deep the seeds were, how many seeds per inch, and all the equipment. It would calculate soil densities and everything for you. And so I remember when I got those as a kid, and my grandparents and my dad would kind of be like trying to fumble to figure it out. I grabbed the manual, read it front to back, and then I became the guy who was programming it and getting it set up. And that kind of, I think, started me going down a computer science path, is where I went, as you mentioned, in college.
So Joe, that you would be a total nerd, doing computer science in 1985, starting school. That's like
yeah, I didn't
the
really
time of Ataris.
Back in school, back in that time, it was there was not a lot of computer stuff back then, and so I was definitely at the forefront. Even when I went to college at the University of Michigan, they were just starting the computer science program, and they didn't know to put it in the engineering college or the literature and science college. So I had to meet the requirements of both. So I had to go humanities, foreign language, social studies to meet the literature, science, and the arts college, the LS&A, and then I had to take all the math and science and computing classes to meet the engineering side as well. So it kind of puts you in a double load.
Yeah, very well-rounded. Steve Jobs would have been happy with that curriculum. So we we want to jump right into the meat of it. You joined Amazon in 2005. What was your first job? Like, how did you get there? What was it like external launch at the company?
Before AWS? Well, it was all focused on retail at the time, and so when I started, I was kind of running. I was brought in to manage network operations at the time. We were just starting Goldcrest and launching in Dublin, so we're splitting retail to run from out of the U.S. as well as into Europe. So that was underway, and so I had a kind of a sister team that operated out of Dublin. So Seattle was kind of the main base, and then Dublin was the other 12 hours. We ran 12-hour shifts and handed off. Shortly after I took over managing that, I actually set it up running North American operations, which is all of our system engineers, network operators, the Remedy team. We called it the SNOC back then, System and Network Operations Center. Kind of handling the front line, running all of our, game day calls and things like that. So it was all focused on retail.
Okay. And did you know when you joined, was the plan to launch externally in 2006? Was it like a big kind of, for
AWS, so what happened was when AWS started moving, we knew it was going to take up data center space. So it was a matter of how we were going to get it out there. S3 was the first product, right? And so I was really getting the storage product up and running. EC2 came later. And it was, we wanted to get it out there and run it externally facing and get it out to customers and offer it as a service. And so as we started spinning up AWS and looking at the infrastructure requirements, I was doing more and more work for AWS and made a job transition back then to basically kind of be the infrastructure liaison and kind of help us set up into going into new countries. Right? So under the managing the operations, I was negotiating all of our network and bandwidth contracts and seeing what we needed to do to expand. And so I took that over for AWS, and they basically said, look, we can utilize the Goldcrest footprint, whereas we bring retail in for Europe, but we have nothing in Asia Pac. So Joe, go figure out how to get us into Asia and what we need to do. So I worked with the product marketing manager at the time was Jake Anderson, and he was in charge to figure it out from the customer perspective, and then I had to figure it out from an infrastructure perspective. So between him and I, we kind of really looked at Asia Pac and said, where do we go? And back then, it was all really new. Like when we were talking to customers and businesses, they're like, yeah, you sell books. Like that was the common theme, books. And we're like, oh yeah, but we've got this cloud system. We want storage and we want to bring this up. And they just get glazed over and they didn't understand what we were talking about or why Amazon was there. But they're like, you're retail. Like we want you in this country or to do and set up for retail. And so they got high centered. So it was a hard conversation to have to kind of help them understand that. And at the time, we didn't know about adoption. This was back in when the financial crisis was starting to hit us back in 2007 and 2008, right? Which drove a ton of adoption for us. It was a good timing overall from a business perspective. But when we were managing through that, we were trying to look at what that adoption rate and who was going to use us. And it turned out a lot of startups wanted to use us, right? So that was kind of our initial big footprint was all startups. And at the time when we were looking at it, we're like, oh, Japan would be a really good market for Asia Pac. But Japan, very conservative business environment, not a ton of startups there, a lot of enterprise and really slow adoption. So we didn't think that would be a good solve. And then we looked at, Australia, they've got some startups there and they're really remote. They could use a solution, but they were so remote, it wouldn't really serve the rest of Asia Pac. And so we kept churning, and China was big, and we were trying to figure out in India wasn't quite developed. And I kind of had the idea, and I sat down with Jake, and as I was going through a lot of the meeting with telcos and data center providers and a lot of Asia Pac businesses out there, they were all hungry to grow. They wanted to catch up to the US. They wanted to catch up to Europe. And I started realizing that if you looked at kind of your some parts of the Asia Pac region, it was a startup. When you talk to Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, Hong Kong, that whole region there in of itself was a big startup. Like the countries themselves wanted to get into technology. So I sat down and talked to Jake about it. And so he's like, oh, that's really interesting because it's startups that are using us. And so we formulated this plan and idea that, we really wanted to go after Southeast Asia because it was where we thought the adoption. And that's what led us into going into Singapore right up front. Because when I started looking at the network architecture and data centers, Singapore and Hong Kong were really your only two at the time that could run. And and so, then it came down, I talked with Singapore, I talked with Hong Kong. Hong Kong was a lot more expensive. They didn't really, know what we wanted. Singapore was cheaper, had good connectivity, and really wanted the retail business there. They wanted to be that logistics hub. So they couldn't get their idea around the cloud, but because Amazon had that retail behind them, they thought, well, if we kind of give you some incentives and help you out, then maybe we can, bring that retail there. So we kind of dangled that as a carrot to kind of get us moving. And that's what got us into Singapore and into Asia.
Interesting.
I was in one of the meetings, Charlie, in which one of the vendors, one of the very big vendors, the CEO of that company was there, and he met Joe, and he said, "Oh, you are the famous Joe," So Joe is pretty well known in APAC because he basically kickstarted a lot of data centers in APAC.
Yeah.
Joe, what's the key?
Sorry, my Roomba just kicked off. Let me kill it real quick.
Okay.
Yep.
There we go.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I was going to ask you. You've been at AWS, Amazon, 15 years now. What's the key to having had such longevity here? What's the secret to that? And what's kept you? What's kept you interested?
So that's I think it's a better way to put it. I don't know if there's any secret, but it's definitely what's kept me interested. One, I've always felt empowered to make decisions, and and when we look at places like, I remember when we were going back and looking at Singapore, even up to today, and we're looking at sites and stuff, your ideas are valued, and there's been that's helped a lot. When we think of solutions, we dive into them. When I've been told no, it's been because it's really not the right thing for the business, and we've dug into that. You dive deep, you figure it out. You look at whether it's one-way doors or two-way doors, and how you're going to manage that for the business overall. And so the ability that Amazon really looks at that and then values your input and what you're bringing to the table. And then on top of that, the growth and the scale that we've had over the last 15 years has been phenomenal, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the challenge that you have to try to figure things out. So I'll kind of circle it back to when I was a kid at Learn and Be Curious, like how does this work? How do we figure that out? I'm kind of that problem solver. And it's just been one big problem after another for us to solve, right? As we go through it. And then and being part of that has been great. So, it's kind of things that motivate me and keep me going.
Yeah, makes sense. What's something that makes you successful here? What's something like that? You manage a team of 100 people now. What makes someone successful on your team?
What's successful on my team?
Yeah, and what's made you successful over your career? And what do successful people like? What kind of qualities do they exude that you notice?
Yeah, for me, for success, it's really understanding the business and the problem you're solving for, and then being able to articulate what that solution could be. So for my team, like a lot of the conversations I've had with them early on is, you're not just a transaction and negotiator. You're not just going out and negotiating just a contract. You're actually finding a supply solution for the business. And Amazon's business is unique in how we think about it and how we raise our demands, all the way from the engineering designs and what we incorporate to raise the bar for ourselves, to how the business and how we manage cash flow on the financial sides as well. We just think differently about that with an underpinning customer-centric view, right? As you look at those areas, how that ends up in the end result of the customer. So for my team members, when I say, look, you're a supply solution architect, you are knowing what those pieces are so that you can negotiate and set up the right solution for the business. You don't overcommit us, you don't undercommit us. Now you got prevailing markets out there that are going to take you sideways one way or another with the vendors, and you won't quite get what we need. But that's where the challenges sit. And so success is understanding those, driving to the right solution, and being able to articulate why it's the best solution for us. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. And what have you noticed, working in Amazon? What was different about here than any of the previous companies you had worked at. You sort of touched on a little bit about sort of the merits of your argument winning the day, but is there anything else that stands out about this place that's different?
That's a very big one. There's a lot. So I'll tell you, when I worked at Disney, Disney was politics. It was, when you see the backstabbing movie companies out there at the upper level, there was a lot of that. And people would say no just to try to block you from doing something, whether or not it was right for the business. And so, that was really eye-opening coming out of the tech industry, going to work for Disney for a bit. But when I switched over to Amazon, it was really that it's almost an engineering mindset, right? Like, we want to look at the details. We want to understand how it's going to do it. And we make data-driven decisions. You just don't see that in a lot of other places right now. You get a lot of people challenging you. Like, definitely there's a lot of smart people at this company, and they're going to challenge you left and right. But that's okay, because you want that, because 9 times out of 10, you'll have everything you need. But that 10th time, someone will ask you something you haven't thought of, which will cause you to change direction. And that's huge. Like, now it gets us more right. Like, we want to be right a lot, right? And so that challenge and those aspects get to us. And I always have people go, I'm like, oh my God, I'm just answering the same question over and over again. I'm like, well, then it's easy. Cut and paste the answer, right? But sometimes someone will think of something a little differently. So that is a huge aspect. The other thing that I really liked, and what actually kind of made me come to Amazon originally, is they call it DevOps now. But at the time, when I was moving over here, a lot of the engineering organizations would develop software and throw it over the wall, launch it, and then the ops team, which is what I usually managed in previous jobs, for managing the data center servers and then the software stacks that were running on it, was left holding the bag. So if something broke, then we were, parsing through, all the different logs and IO reports and, whatever we were looking at the time through the kernel, trying to figure out why the software engineering developed wouldn't run, right? And then trying to get back to them and convince them it was really a software bug and not really a hardware issue. And it was just a lot of push and churn and QA environments. And when I came to Amazon, the engineers were on call. Like, when they developed the software and they launched it, like, their pagers went off if it broke. And I was like, whoa, that's really interesting. That's something I wanted in the operations side for a long time, is hold accountability to software developers. Now, that comes with its own set of burdens and burnout and what we've called a lot of technical debt, right? As we try to move fast and get that through, and it takes time away from our engineering talent or software development talent. But it was an interesting concept where Amazon was all about ownership and accountability, through there. That was really intriguing to me. And so that's one of the original things that I came over to try to run an operations team that had that aspect to it. And I could see all the wins that you could get out of that moving as a company. And then it just compounded as Amazon continued to grow and develop. And, then I started understanding the leadership principles and how they applied. And it just became an environment that I could really embrace.
Right on. On that leadership principle thread, like, what is some of your most important leadership philosophies now, running a global team of 100 people? What sort of would you say is your main leadership philosophy? How do you do that?
Running a team of 100 people? Well, for me, since it's global, trying to make sure we keep in touch and communication is key. I hate to admit it, we are still a very Seattle-centric organization. A lot of the decisions and a lot of stuff that's happening. So, really trying to make APAC and EMEA feel included, that they are empowered to make decisions, that their input's there, and really work through how we keep that communication going. Are kind of key aspects for me to keep the team in alignment and empowered to do the right things. Does that kind of help what you're looking for?
Yeah. Is there anything that's maybe like not documented in the leadership principles that you believe in, like your own personal approach to it? Or maybe there's just a favorite one. Well, I don't know.
I think all the leadership principles are pretty important. That's why they're there. But and I can always give you a reason why each one of them is for what we do. But for me, the communication, the people interaction, I mean, it kind of falls under earned trust, but it's really what's going to let people understand where you're coming from and why you're saying things that you are, why you're promoting a solve or a solution. Doing it, be able to get to it face to face is really critical. We see, especially in the remote regions, there's a lot that happens over email. You get responses next day. People are really slammed on things, so they'll send off, short, terse little messages, basically just to get a response or what there. And you can't read type. You don't know what the facial expressions were. You don't get that influence, inflection points through the conversation. So, the forms of communication, the worst is email, and then the second is just voice, and then the third best, the third and the best is to actually have interaction and at least video in, if not real time face, in-person conversations. And you'll get all those nuances. And so to me, that's a really important piece that you've got to be able to do. And that's just reinforced in today's environment when we have to do everything over Chime, that you really need to try to put your video on. And I recognize there's a ton of technical challenges on that, right? Like my internet goes out, Chime's updating, PC reboots, my Wi-Fi connection says it's got a poor internet connection all of a sudden. Kids are on YouTube and everything else, downloading everything. And so, your video cuts in and out. But, I try to make sure I'm on video as much as I can for every meeting, just to make sure that you get that facial, especially if you're speaking and you're having that interaction. I've seen lately, like a lot of people start, they'll be off video, but if they're going to start involving themselves in the conversation, they'll click it on. And I think that works well. At least we start being conscious of that. And so, but we're learning those things as we go along and how to be better at it. But it's I think, going to also help us work as more of a better global company.
Yeah, we've been forced to learn quickly, I feel like, in the last 2 months. And doing that is kind of like necessity now more than like an optional skill set. Mm-hmm. Let's jump to a couple, like we like to ask a couple things like on the personality side, just to get a little flavor for who you are. What are some things that you like to do outside of work, like maybe some of your hobbies or interests?
Well, my two biggest hobbies, I like to be on the water. So I do a lot of boating, a lot of wakeboarding, a lot of wake surfing behind the boat. Cool. I'll usually try to get out, it's summer months now that's starting to get nice outside. I try to get out every weekend, at least once to do that. And then the second hobby I like to do is drive fast. So, I've got a couple fast cars that I'll take out to the track and drive on the track. I'll do some competitive driving. Just competed this last weekend.
Oh, that's cool.
We did a little relay. We tried something new with the race. We did a relay, and my team came through awesome, and we took first place. So that was really cool.
Like you're driving a car like around a speedway, like an oval track.
Normally it's road course. So kind of think Formula One style racing. So it's a lot of open track, high performance driving events where you're out there and you're just kind of doing your personal best. And then another one is kind of what they call autocross, where it's precision time driving. So they'll set up a course and they'll set up a bunch of cones. And so you try to, and it's timed. So you'll go through a start gate, the clock will start, you try to drive through the whole course and then end, and the fastest time kind of wins. And if you like hit a cone or knocked it over, you get a 2-second penalty. If you missed a whole section because you just blew by it because you're going too fast, it's a 10-second penalty. Well, then you're just written off. And we're usually in the upper end of the competition, we're usually within tenths of a second of each other. Just this weekend, even on the relay, the second and third place team were, I think, 1/100th of a second between them was the deciding factor. So
wow.
It comes down to be pretty.
So where is the racing track?
There's a couple.
Where is this racing track?
Pacific Speedway out here in outside of Kent. And then there's the one I like to go to is the Ridge, which is outside of Olympia by Shelton, Washington. But I've up and I've gone to California and I've driven Laguna Seca and the Sears Raceway out there. I've shipped it out to Texas and drove Circuit of the Americas, which is the Formula One. It's a lot of fun.
How fast are you going in these races?
You're usually on an autocross. You're not going to hit more than 90, but it's very short runs. So usually around 60, 70 top speed. In the big tracks, I'll hit 150 to 160. A couple of them I've hit 180.
Not bad.
Wow.
What are some like, what kind of content do you like to consume outside of work? Do you read like newspapers or books or movies? What kind of stuff?
Like a lot of sci-fi action stuff. Your typical guy on that aspect. But I like to read a lot. And again, it's kind of along that sci-fi kind of fantasy stuff is, just it's an escape algorithm for me. So if I can just get in a book and then just kind of, make the world disappear for a couple hours, it's kind of my downtime where I don't have to really think about anything and kind of turn the brain off.
Yeah. Any like what's kind of an example of a book that's maybe on your all-time favorite list?
Oh, geez. I like the Dune series when I read that a long time ago. It's still one of my more favorites, and I see that in the movies they're going to make another remake of it. So I'm really kind of anxious to see that.
Right on.
Series that I like to read, stuff like that.
Yeah. If you could meet 3 people for lunch, anyone like that you could choose from all of history, who would it be?
Oh wow. History, who would it be? God, I don't know. I'd have to think about that one for a bit, actually.
Okay, we can come back. We'll let you think about it for a bit. Let me ask you, like we usually ask people too, like what's some like advice you might give to yourself looking back at your career? Like what advice would you give to your college age self, or to somebody who's starting out in their career at this point?
Take some time to learn. And what I mean by that is, we move fast. We're all fast paced. Amazon's fast paced, and you're trying to make decisions fast. And especially when you're coming in new into some things, you think you might know more, or actually you probably do, but you don't know the context of it. And so you might have the right solution if it was only presented a certain way, but if you actually dug deeper into that situation, you'd realize the context was different and required something more different way of looking at it. And so kind of taking that time to really learn. So it's part of dive deep, really understand it, and kind of learn and be curious to really kind of also learn about what might be driving the underpinnings of what's going on. So you want to make a decision fast, but make sure you understand all the moving pieces. Be open to people challenging you, right? I know my younger self would have a chip on the shoulder. No, I know this is right, and I probably was right, but at the same time, I didn't listen to where those nuances were, and those little nuances could change how you're viewing some of that and how you would approach some of that. And you learn that over time as you as things progress. And I think from a younger self, it'd been good to kind of understand those things more, and where you wanted to go and how to tackle things.
Very cool. There's one question that we typically ask in closing, and that's, what is your like general philosophy and approach to life?
Philosophy and approach to life. For me, I'm always doing too much. I'm always kind of taking on more and more because I like to problem solve. I like to keep busy and active. So for me, it's what I can do to do that. And I'm the consummate negotiator. I like a deal. So a lot of everything I involve is all about how can I get a better at it, from going to Best Buy and buying a TV or whatever it may be. I'm always kind of in that mode, figure out what we could do and how could I change it. So, my philosophy is just kind of built around that structure in my life. I don't know, and if it comes across the right way or not, but that's how I kind of build and operate on everything. But I like to have fun, as you can tell from getting out on the water and relaxing and be able to turn stuff off by getting into a good book. Everything else, if I got a contractor coming over or whatever I'm doing, I'm always trying to figure out how to make it better.
I feel like that. Does that come from like? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying that then Joe is in the exact right spot, because he's the main deal negotiator for AWS.
Yeah, they say, some career advice I got a long time ago was it's good to round yourself out. Like we all have our blind spots, things that we could do better, and we're just not really strong at. But double down on your superpowers, right? What you're good at. What are you really good at? You want to be able to not have a big deficit there that'll drag you down. So you have to round yourself out. But don't concentrate on that to try to be the best in something you're not good at, because you will naturally be better on something that's kind of intuitive for you. And so, as you pointed out, Sid, like it's something I've done my whole life, was kind of navigate into something in the best way possible and negotiate something. I kind of always done that my whole life. So being in this position is kind of doubling down on something that innate for me that I'm good at.
Right on. And
I think
I was gonna say, do you ever see yourself heading back to the farm at any point? Is that in your future, maybe in retirement, getting a plot of land?
I hated getting up at 4 a.m, getting out in the field before school, come home directly from school, getting out in the field again. So I never wanted to go back. It's a lot of hard work. Now that I'm older though, and I don't have kids of my own, but my girlfriend has kids that we hang out with, and my nieces and nephews. The one aspect of the farm that I do miss is that open land. I had a mini bike when I was 5, and I was riding the motorcycle through the fields. When I was driving the pickup or tractors, we could just get up and go. There was nothing we were going to damage. It was a lot of freedom, and I learned a lot and was able to do a lot more that a lot of kids today just don't have exposure to, especially in the cities and stuff. So I miss that aspect and wish that I had that more for the kids. But the work and the grueling aspects of it, no, don't miss that at all.
Right on. Well, I'm keeping an eye on the clock so we can get you to your next meeting, Joe. But I think we covered like the real meaty stuff we wanted to get to, and just want to say thanks for setting aside some time and chatting shop with us today.
Absolutely. Hope it was helpful.
We got a very good tagline for the interview. We can call it the deal maker.
Yeah. I think so. But
yo, what up, everybody? Thanks for tuning into the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. Feel free to leave a rating, review, what have you. But most of all, go have a fantastical day.
Take care.
Okay, we'll see you soon. Goodbye.